It's about a race of giant vampires.
Vampires?
They came out of nowhere. And swarmed and swarmed.
What did they do, Doctor?
Swarmed, that was the word he used. They swarmed all over the universe. That one single vampire could suck the life out of an entire planet.
One single vampire could suck the life out of an entire planet?
Yes.
Rubbish.
Hello, and welcome to another entry in the History of series. Today we are adding to the archive the Great Vampires, the historic enemies of the Time Lords, rivaling even the Daleks in terms of sheer power. So, let's find out their history. Because the story of the Iscariot was never recorded within the Matrix, there were many varying accounts of their origin. However, whether in one of Rassilon's early experiments creating black holes, or during the anchoring of the thread, all accounts agreed that they were accidentally released from their dimension by the Time Lords. At that instant, one Iscariot appeared on the homeworld, known to us as Gallifrey, at the site that would later be known as the Caldera, as thousands of servants of the Iscariot began to tear their way into the continuum at many points throughout history. Throughout the Dark Times, the vampires caused mass destruction and chaos throughout the cosmos. Through the use of their taint, they created the Malak, the Saturnines, and Earth's vampires. The First Doctor also speculated that the Suishi were related to the Great Vampires. When the Kotturuh brought mortality to the universe, the Great Vampires were the only beings too powerful to be stripped of their immortality altogether. Instead, the two species, being of about equal power, were forced to come to an agreement. The Kotturuh forced the vampires' immortality to become reliant on stealing the lives of mortal beings, thus making them into agents of death in their own right. Melody Malone noted that this made them about as popular as a weeping angel at a wedding. Richard Francis Burton hypothesized that the great houses obtained the ability of regeneration by intentionally modifying themselves with the Iscariot taint. One of the Rue texts, revered by the cult of Rassilon the Vampire, claimed that Rassilon allowed himself to be bitten by a great vampire, and was a vampire himself by the end of his life. The sheer ferocity and resilience of the vampires made their defeat very difficult, even for the Time Lords. They waged the lengthy eternal war to drive them back. Since conventional weapons were virtually useless, Rassilon ordered the construction of great bow ships to exploit the one weakness the vampires had, their vulnerability to being impaled through the heart. Though billions of people were slain, and whole star systems were decimated, the Time Lords were finally able to push the Iscariot back to their own universe, and the outlets to their universe were blocked and reinforced by containment shells disguised as planets, including Earth. Sometime during the war, the Dalek Time Squad captured a great vampire by attacking a coffin ship that was transporting one. The Prime Strategist and scientist experimented on it, extracting its DNA to create the Dalek symbiont. During the war, entire worlds were turned into laboratories of cruelty, where the Iscariot destroyed the bodies of the inhabitants until only their nervous system remained, alive and in agony, but without any hope of help. Every 13 local years, their servants on each world would round up a 13th of the population and ship them to the vampires' galactic headquarters in the bloody citadel of Alucard, where they would be harvested for blood. These fallen worlds were retro-annulled by the great houses at the end of the war, returning them to normal. Though the Time Lords were able to find and destroy all other Iscariot, the swarm leader, the king of all vampires, was able to escape. This sole survivor hid within E-space, using his great power to draw the ship Hydrax with him. He turned 3 humans on this ship into vampires to feed and serve him for 1,000 years until the time of a rising. Since they had emerged at the beginning of history, the Iscariot taint remained within the fabric of the universe even after their defeat. It couldn't be removed without unweaving time itself. After plugging the last hole to the Iscariot's universe with an artificial planet, the engineer, who was Omega, murmured to himself that he hoped no one would ever try drilling through to the core. In a TARDIS projection during the 8th Doctor's infection with Anti-Time, the head of the Arcalian chapter houses, Provost Lord Tepesh, revealed himself as a great vampire in disguise, even saying he was a direct descendant of the King Vampire. Tepesh claimed that the great vampires were a peaceful lot, content to drink the blood of non-sentient, genetically bred cattle, until Rassilon showed up, declaring the vampires should not be allowed to exist, beginning a 500-year war of mass extermination. Some other Iscariot apparently also survived. They attempted to re-enter the universe, failing to do so. One of Rassilon's titles was Conqueror of the Iskaroth. His throne appeared to be made of the skeletons of giant bats. By the time of the Doctor and Romana, the great vampires and their history were not widely known on Gallifrey. However, the Doctor had heard distorted versions of the tale from an old hermit, and basic instructions were still included in the oldest part of all 305 Type 40 TARDIS databanks, the Record of Rassilon. It contained instructions on how to kill the King Vampire, and that it was the duty of every Time Lord to do so, even at the cost of their own lives. During the last Great Time War, the Time Lords at the command of Cardinal Olistra released the great vampires from their universe to fight a fleet of Dalek saucers. Despite the War Doctor's protests, Councillor Vultrix proceeded to open a rift, allowing them through into N-space. The memories of this particular event proved the Ninth Doctor's memories of the war were authentic. The Cold, a Validium-based weapon similar to the Nemesis statue, could suck its targets into another universe, where it would be destroyed by the inhabitants. Those creatures sought to enter N-space through the Cold, attacking it with their gigantic black wings, enormous clawed hands, and huge teeth. One's face was said to be the size of a Drashic. It is believed that they were great vampires. Lolita once pressed against the very fabric of time and space to show Count Dracula a glimpse of the Iskaroth wanting to enter the web of time. Gendricinus speculated that the Iskaroth would be able to return through the Grandfather's Maw, a gulf in reality connecting the father's future to the deepest past. In an alternative timeline, during one of Romana II, Leela, and Narvin's trips to alternative Gallifreys, they visited one where Rassilon was killed by the great vampires after completing the transaction barrier. The vampires then darkened the barrier to block out all light so they might live safely on Gallifrey. Over the next millennia, the vampires gradually took over the True Lords, until a battle between Vampire Lord Prydon and the True Lady Majestrix Barusa. During this battle, with Leela's help, Narvin and Romana helped Barusa and recaptured the transaction barrier, increasing the light levels allowed to pass through, therefore destroying the vampires. And that is the history of the great vampires, once a powerful race feared by many species across the universe, eventually forgotten by the passage of time. But anyway guys, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, then make sure to leave a like and subscribe down below, as it really helps out. And also, happy Doctor Who Day. Yeah, I didn't forget this time. Bye.